continue on 49ers Live tonight post-game recap. Professor B here at the studios here in San Francisco. In case you just missed it, the Eagles were winners. Philadelphia Eagles winning it tonight by a score of, they end up winning 40-22. The Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl for the as yep. So we're gonna show you some more footage out there. So here's a from city of Burley Love to home here. So continue on Niners Radio 49, Professor B. We're gonna get you out to the recap of the scores, or just to recap you the game itself in its entirety. And a lot of numbers we have to go through as well. We're going to start it off with the first half. And I think you look back in perspective, maybe what happened. I mean, them getting Shaquan Barkley was probably was definitely the best thing that could happen to them. Even though I'm a Niner fan, I do Niner stuff, but I always, as a fan and as a broadcaster, give credit in good sportsmanship where credit is due. And it all really came down to the ground attack, having an exclusive running game. And this is probably the best back they've ever had in their history. You look at all the great running backs the Eagles have had over the years, from Wilbert Montgomery. And then you had Herschel Walker was there for a time. You had Ricky Waters, and then you had for 4 years in Philly, you had Brian Westbrook, Deuce Staley. So we're going to take it break it down for the first half. We'll begin in the first quarter. The Eagles got on the board on a Jalen Hurts end up scoring on a touchdown that put the Eagles up 7-0, and it stayed that way in the second quarter. Jake Elliott hit a 48-yard field goal. It made it 17-0, and then it was 24-0 on Jalen Hurts quarterback. And Cooper DeJean had a 38-yard pick, 6 interception for a touchdown. And then Elliott had a 29-yard field goal. At halftime, the Eagles scored 24 unanswered points in the first half to have a commanding 24-0 lead. As you look at the scenes of the picturesque shots, 100-yard mark, but he was, and as we're going to go into the second half of this game, first half of this game, Barkley had 499 rushing yards this postseason, third most in NFL history. Look at Saquon Barkley's numbers. Of course, most yards in a season. He ended up passing up, you think, of Saquon Barkley, Terrell Davis at 97 and 98 in the Super Bowl years. Eric Dickerson, yards from scrimmage. Eric Dickerson in 1984 when he passed up O.J. Simpson in a single season. And then you had Adrian Peterson for the Minnesota Vikings. So we go to the third quarter now. Jake Elliott increased the Eagles' lead with a commanding 27-0 lead with a field goal. Devontae Smith, 46-yard pass from Jalen Hurts, 34-0. Then Xavier Worthy caught a pass from Patrick Mahomes. The two-point conversion failed, 34-6. Jake Elliott hits a 48-yard field goal. Then he added a 50-yard field goal. Elliott ended up hitting he had 4 field goals in the game. And I think that Elliott's field goal mark, we'll try to see on the record books for most field goals in the Super Bowl. And then we look at the final box score of the game. Looking at the final stats, the Philadelphia Eagles total yards 345, total yards to the Chiefs 275. The Eagles were in the turnover ratio. They forced 3 Chiefs the Eagles forced 3 Chiefs turnovers. They get 14 points off of their takeaways from Kansas City, and Philly was +4. They were +4 in that turnover takeaway ratio, and the Eagles dominant 36 minutes and 58 seconds to the Chiefs, 23 minutes and 2 seconds. And then look at the final numbers as we look at the box score. Patrick Mahomes threw for 257 yards, threw for 3 touchdowns, threw 2 interceptions in the game. The X-Man, Xavier Worthy, 8 catches for 157 yards, 19.6 yards per catch, 2 touchdown receptions. And then for Jalen Hurts, he was 17 out of 22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 119 quarterback rating. And then Hurts rushed for 11 carries, 72 yards. Barkley was held to only 57 yards rushing. Barkley did catch 6 balls for 40 yards. Devontae Smith, 4 catches for 69 yards, averaging 17.3 yards per catch in the contest. And then here's some other notes as we take a look at this. And then So we're trying to find out what's the record, and then for for Jason Elliott, Jake Elliott, correction, Jake Elliott, he broke one record. He ended up was 4 for 4. He ended up hitting 4 field goals in the contest without a miss. Now he owns that record of all time. The old record was set by Ray Warshing of the 49ers. He played in 2 Super Bowls. He hit 3 originally in Super Bowl 16. He ended up hitting 3. He ended up breaking Don Chandler, the legendary Green Bay Packers kicker Don Chandler, who hit 3 field goals. I'm trying to find this out for Super Bowl records. It was Don Chandler who played for the Packers, I think, in the first 2 Super Bowls. Don Chandler. Actually, Joe Elliott made 4 in this game. He has the all-time record in multiple Super Bowls without a miss. He he ended up tying in a single game record. He shares the record with Ray Warshing and the late Don Chandler of the Green Bay Packers. And I'm just trying to get this information correctly. He ended up setting that record. He hit 4 field goals. I'm just, yeah, he ended up in that game alone hit 4 field goals in the Packers' convincing win over the Raiders 33-14 in Super Bowl II down at the Orange Bowl in Miami back in January of 1968 as the Packers would win their second Super Bowl 14 years later on January 24th, 1982. Ray Warshing ended up tying that record by Don Chandler of the Green Bay Packers with 4 in the Niners' 26-21 win over the Bengals in Super Bowl 16 43 years ago. And you got to remember, Don Chandler, Ray Warshing hit some big, and then he also and then he hit 2 more field goals 40 years ago on Super Bowl 19 in the Niners 38-16 drubbing over Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins team that scored the most points in all of football, led by quarterback Dan Marino and the Marx brothers, both Mark Clayton and Mark Duper, in that Super Bowl. So we've taken a look on our here we go. So you look at that, some of the footage right there. Ray, Ray Warshing hit the hit 4 field goals in that win. He got the big field goal, 2 big field goals. The in the first half. Remember, the Niners had a 14-0 lead. They drove down after, hit a big Warshing hit a big field goal, and then the Bengals muffed the squibbly line kick, and the Niners recovered it, and then they end up increased their lead to 20-0. The Niners scored 20 unanswered points in that first half of that Super Bowl in the Pontiac Silverdome in Detroit, in Pontiac, Michigan. They're about 30 minutes north from downtown Detroit. The Niners end up winning, or going up 20-0, and then in the fourth quarter, the Bengals got back into that game. They got back into the game. They end up, it was 20-7. It was 20-7. Then the Niners stopped on that big goal line play. Dan Bunce stopped, I think it was Charles Alexander or Pete to getting into the end zone. And it was that fourth goal line play. The Pete Johnson, the big money fullback, they stopped them at the goal line, and the Niners, the momentum definitely shifted back to the Bengals, which then the fourth quarter, Ray Warshing hit 2 big field goals to put the game away, and the Niners went on to win their first Super Bowl in franchise history, the first of would be 4 Super Bowls of the decade of the 80s for the 49ers, and the first of 5 overall in franchise history. So Ray Warshing was 4 for 4, and he would tie that record with Don Chandler of the Green Bay Packers, who booted 2 in their convincing win over the Raiders. And then he hit 2 more field goals in the Niners' 38-16 win over the Miami Dolphins in Super Bowl 19. So he has a perfect 5 for 5, and he now ties that record. Jake Elliott ties Ray Warshing for the most field goals, or he may have broke that record. Now, he's 9 for 9. He's now tied with Ray Warshing for the most field goal attempts without a miss. But now the record he actually tied Ray Warshing's record with 5. And then after that, he now owns that record. He passes Ray Warshing. And he was money with the 49ers' success in the early mid-'80s. So we all talk about in football, offense wins tickets, defense wins championships, but special teams is very vital of winning big ball games. Winning is the deciding factor of winning games, and that, you always talk about special teams is the deciding factor whether you're going to win between wins and losses. And that's when a lot of head coaches in the week of doing practice, they always want to put in their special teams practice first, and that's always the key. So that is another record. And then here's some more of Super Bowl notes from the game. The Eagles were +4 in that turnover takeaway ratio. They were +4 in that ratio. In that turnover takeaway ratio, the Eagles rushed for 118 yards in all 4 of their playoff games. That's the most ever. And then here's some other stats. Eagles win the franchise's second Super Bowl And now I think it's now been 9 times the team had a chance to three-peat and has denied. Of course, it involved the Niners and the Raiders on multiple occasions. The Steelers had a chance in winning back-to-back Super Bowls in 1974 and 75. Then in '76, they lost the AFC Championship to the Oakland Raiders out at the Oakland Coliseum. They end up losing that, or the Raiders beat the Steelers 24-7, denying their bit of a three-peat. And the Steelers curtain had the number one overall ranked defense, but I don't think Franco Harris did not play in that game because he was injured. And then the Raiders, of course, 2 weeks later beat the Minnesota Vikings in Super Bowl 11 down at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena to win the franchise's first Super Bowl for the John Madden Raiders team, the first Bay Area Super Bowl title for any of the Bay Area teams. And then, of course, they denied the Steelers of a three-peat, and then Steelers got back there again in 78 and winning it all again in 78, 79, and had a chance to three-peat in 1980, but they don't even they missed the playoffs entirely, all because of injuries and an aging roster. And, of course, they didn't even make the playoffs in 1980, but then the Niners had a chance winning back-to-back Super Bowls in 88 and 89, had a chance in 1990 to repeat. And the Niners would just lose that heartbreaker to the New York Giants at Candlestick. The same Giants team the Niners beat on Monday Night Football in a 7-3 defensive battle in 1990. And then of course, then the Cowboys, who beat the Niners twice in the NFC Championship game in 92 and 93 and went on to win back-to-back Super Bowls, they had a chance of a three-peat in 1984, and the Niners ended it with Steve Young and them winning it 38-28, and the Niners ended up beating the Chargers in Super Bowl 29 30 years ago. And then the Denver Broncos had a chance to go for a three-peat after John Elway's retirement, but then they were hit by a lot of injuries, and they lose Terrell Davis with a torn ACL. They end up missing the playoffs in 2000 or 1999. And then the Patriots had a chance to go for a three-peat after winning their third Super Bowl in 4 years, but then they lost to the Denver Broncos in the AFC Divisional Playoffs. They were denied a three-peat. And then the Chiefs had a chance, and they get back to the Super Bowl only to get steamboat raced by the Eagles, as they are the new champions, the new Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. So we're going to go on to take a look at some 49ers news, and as we will still looking at our monitor, here in our studios here in San Francisco, Professor B. Eagles defeating the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 40-22, as the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl for the second time in their history. So we take a look more on the Philadelphia Eagles, and we look So the Philadelphia Eagles win another championship, their second Super Bowl in franchise history. And also, just to look at some more stats, the Eagles have 19 postseason wins. They've won more postseason games than any team in the NFL or at least in the NFC since 2000. They have the best overall record by any team in the NFC since 2000. Or I could probably say they may have the best record in the NFL since 2000. You look at what the Patriots have done with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And more importantly, and then remember the Eagles also, it's their fifth NFL championship in world championship in franchise history. Not to mention the fact they did win three championships prior to the league merger in 1970. They won it all in 1948. They end up beating the Chicago Cardinals in the snow at Old. They end up beating the Chicago Cardinals in 1948 in that blizzard in Philadelphia's at Connie Mack Stadium or at Shai Park in Philadelphia. And taking a look of then they beat the Los Angeles Rams at the LA Memorial Coliseum 14-0 in the 1949 championship game. So the Eagles had won back-to-back titles. This is their fifth NFL title in franchise history. They won back-to-back titles in 1948 and 49. They end up beating the Chicago Cardinals in a blizzard at Shai Park in Philadelphia. Then they would win it all again in 1949 with shutting out the LA Rams in Los Angeles 14-0. And then after that, they would it would be another 11 years before they returned to the championship game. They end up beating the Green Bay Packers on the day after Christmas on December 26, 1960, with a 17-13 win over the Packers as they played that game. They end up playing that championship game at Old Franklin Field in Philadelphia. They end up winning that game in Philadelphia at Old Franklin Field on the day after Christmas back on December 26, 1960. And that was it for the Eagles. They would not get back to another championship game of any kind or win another championship game of any kind until 1980. Of course, the Eagles would go on to they've been to the Super Bowl 5 times. They're 2-3 in the big games. They end up they're first with the Dick Vermeil Eagles, led by Dick Vermeil head coach, San Jose native Dick Vermeil. He stays out there in to Martha's out there in Napa doing his wine. They end up plus he's good friends with Bill Walsh. The Eagles end up beating the Dallas Cowboys 20-7 in cold, frigid Philadelphia. Then they would end up losing to the Oakland Raiders, to the Cinderella Oakland Raiders team led by Jim Plunkett, the wild card Raiders, 27-10 in the same building at the Superdome in New Orleans. And then, of course, the Eagles after that loss, the Eagles had come a long way within 4 years. Of course, they lost They won the championship over Green Bay. By the way, that was Vince Lombardi's only championship defeat in the decade of the '60s. They went 5-1 in championship games in the '60s. They won 5 NFL championships, and including winning the first 2 Super Bowls. They were no doubt the team of the '60s. The Eagles, after that championship season of 1960, they went through a down period. They in fact only had one. They would not, and then the late '60s things just through the early mid '70s, from the late '60s through the early mid '70s, things kind of flamed out for the city of brotherly love. They went through some lean years, and then Dick Vermeil took over that team in 1976 after pulling off maybe considered one of the greatest upsets in Rose Bowl history, as UCLA knocked off top-ranked Ohio State 23-10 to win that Rose Bowl, and denied Woody Hayes a chance of a national championship. Then he goes to Philadelphia, built that team through the draft. They end up, by 1978, they got back towards respectability. In fact, their first winning season since 1966. And then after that, the Eagles would go on to make the playoffs in '78 that year. They go on back to the playoffs again in '79. I believe Dick Vermeil was the NFL Coach of the Year, got a long-term contract extension. Then 1980, they end up overtaking the Dallas Cowboys to win the NFC East not by a big margin. They would go on to beat the Cowboys in the NFC title game. Many consider one of the greatest wins in franchise history, beating their longtime rival, the Cowboys, to go to Super Bowl 15. They lose that Super Bowl to the Raiders 27-10. And then after that, they would lose to the New York Giants in the wild card in 1981. Then things kind of went south for the Eagles again. Dick Vermeil stepped down after, being burnt out, and then by the mid '80s, there was a lot of uncertainty for the Eagles franchise. Speculation they may move, but it didn't happen, as Leonard Toews would sell the team after being with financial problems and then end up Norman Braman bought the team and kept the team in Philadelphia. The Eagles, went through a rebuilding process with Buddy Ryan building that who left was Chicago Bears Super Bowl team in '85, go to Philly in '86, built that defense with Reggie White and others, and then they end up getting back to the playoffs in '88, but then they lost 3 straight times in the playoffs. As we are taking a look, some of the footage, video courtesy of NBC 10 Philadelphia. Getting us the scenes there. They end up losing 3 times in the playoffs. They lose that playoff game to the Bears at Soldier Field in the fog on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, 1988. Then they lose to the Rams in the wild card again at home, and then they lose again to the Redskins, and then the Eagles, after losing 3 straight first-round playoffs, they end up parting ways with Buddy Ryan. Then they bring in Rich Kotite, and it looked like the Eagles still had that defense intact, but then the first play of that '91 season, Randall Cunningham blows out his knee in a game against the Packers, missed the rest of the year. The Eagles defense, which number 1 ranked defense, which, by the way, congratulations to former Philadelphia Eagle Eric Allen, inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Along with him, Jared Allen, the former Chief and Viking, and tight end Antonio Gates, all getting inducted in this class of 2025 Hall of Fame. They'll be getting inducted later in the summer, in August, some 7 months' time. And then the Eagles had the number 1 defense. They finished 10-6, did not make the playoffs. And then, tragedy struck that nothing would fail more compared to what happened that offseason when Jerome Brown tragically died in a horrible car accident in Florida during that offseason. And then, the Eagles were able to get back to the playoffs and win their first playoff game in more than a decade. But then, then they lose to the Cowboys in the division, to the eventual Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys in the divisional playoffs. And then, unfortunately, the Eagles weren't able to keep Reggie White in Philly, and Reggie White would ultimately sign with the Green Bay Packers. And that defense, Buddy Ryan built, that team just their window was getting ready already, was just about closing with the new era of advent of free agency. They weren't going to keep all these players, and within the next couple of years, that the team that Buddy Ryan built started to fall apart, and then the Eagles were going through a period of transition with ownership change. Norman Brayman sells the team to Jeffrey Lurie, a Hollywood film movie producer from Boston, Massachusetts, bought the team in the spring of 1984. And I've heard some stories that he was not liked at the beginning, but, he was trying to model the Eagles just like the 49ers were at that time. I'm looking at some of these highlights, how the Eagles defense really flew over the ball, played some knockout defense, like no breaks, no breaks. And as we take a more look at some shots. So taking a look, we continue on the Eagles' history. Of course, 1995 World, 1994, the Eagles got off to a good start. They had a convincing win over your 49ers at Candlestick Park, where Steve Young went ballistic on the sideline. Many considered it was the low point of the season for the 49ers, but after that, both teams went opposite ends of the spectrum after that game. At the halfway point, the Eagles were 7-2, right there, battling with Dallas for the top spot in the NFC East. And then the injuries caved in, and they just fell apart, finished the year on a 7-game losing streak to end the '94 season. Then they parted ways with Richie Kotite after the '94 season concluded, meaning Jeffrey Lurie was going to bring his own guy in. And then I think it was around this month, 30 years ago, they bring in former 49ers defensive coordinator Ray Rhodes to Philadelphia, which was a surprise, kind of a surprise, kind of was a surprise move for them to bring him in to be the head coach, as the Eagles were going through a period of transition. Randall Cunningham, of course, broke his leg in the 1993 season against the Jets, and then they just did not, that was a so. There we go. So Here we go. So the Eagle. So then there was a period. The Eagles, of course, went through a lot of changes. Jeffrey Lurie taking over the team. Ray Rhodes, former 49ers defensive coordinator, was hired. In fact, the 49ers ended up losing both of their coordinators because Ray Rhodes ended up going to Philadelphia. And then Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan's dad, Mike, takes the job at Denver. Of course, the Broncos would go on. The Eagle, he led the Broncos to 2 Super Bowl victories back to back in the late '90s, while Ray Rhodes took the Philadelphia Eagles to 2 playoff appearances in 4 years. Which his first year there in Philadelphia, the Eagles go 10-6. They made the playoffs as a wild card. There was not a lot of expectations for the Eagles in 1985, which was kind of a team in transition, with not only with some transitional period with ownership change and with a new head coach, and they bring in the West Coast offense, and the Eagles go on to win 10 games. They would go on to just annihilate the Detroit Lions in Philadelphia in that wild card playoff game, and then they lose to the Cowboys again a week later to the eventual Super Bowl champion Cowboys, who end up going to win their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years to cement themselves as the team of the '90s. And then the Eagles got back to the playoffs again in '96, winning 10 games. They end up going 10-6, but then end up losing to your 49ers out in the rain at Candlestick Park in the monsoon, which was on December 29th, 1996, was yours truly's birthday. And the Niners pitched a shutout 14-0 before they end up losing to the Packers, to the eventual Super Bowl champion Green Bay Packers in the divisional playoff a week later. And then, the Eagles went through, the Eagles missed the play. The Eagles, of course, struggled in the late '90s. They ended up going 3-13, suffered through their worst season ever. And then the Eagles parted ways with Ray Rhodes, and then they bring in Andy Reid. And this is when the fun begins for the Philadelphia Eagles. Andy Reid drafts Donovan McNabb. He gets booed. A lot of people thought they were going to get Ricky Williams. And Doug Peterson was a journeyman quarterback. Played under Don Shula. Played under Mike Holmgren in Green Bay. They bring in the West Coast offense. And then in 2000, the Eagles end up, Eagles had the turnaround year from 5-11 to 11-5. Made the playoffs for the first time in 4 years. And they win their first playoff game in 5 years with a convincing win against a team. Then they end up beating them again in 2001, and then went all the way to the NFC Championship game. They lose to the Rams in St. Louis, and then they end up, losing to Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC title game in '02, which was the last game ever played at Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, to the Bucs, who end up winning the Super Bowl that year over the Raiders, and they lose again for the 3rd straight year to Carolina in the NFC title game. They finally get to the Super Bowl with T.O. coming on board, leaving the 49ers, and then they lose to the Patriots, who the Patriots were going to win their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. And then, things fell apart between Donovan McNabb and T.O. in Philly. T.O. would end up getting suspended for insubordinate conduct detrimental to the team. They end up parting ways after the season, and then the Eagles were very competitive in the 2000s. They won another. They were able to, after the disappointing 2005 season, they were able to rebound. After Donovan McNabb tears his ACL, former Niner, San Jose native Jeff Garcia carried them to the playoffs. They were 5-6, and they ran the table. They ended up losing to the Saints in the divisional playoff, and then they They would make it back to the playoffs in 2000 to the NFC title game in 2008, and then 2009 and 10 early exits in the first round playoffs. And then things kind of went bad in 2011. This so-called dream team that get them to the Super Bowl. And I'll never forget that game against the 49ers in Philadelphia where the Niners came back and scored 21 unanswered points to steal that win in Philadelphia. And I knew when they came back and won that game, this was Jim Harbaugh's first year, that knew it was something special with that team. And even though things didn't work out for the 49ers that year in 2011 and they lose to the eventual Super Bowl champion New York Giants, who end up winning the NFC East with a 9-7 record versus the Eagles' 8-8 record. That one game that the Eagles couldn't win was when they gave against the 49ers or against the New York Giants. Also looking on this board, the Eagles now have had, 3 championships, 2 for the Eagles, 1. So, looking at that Super Bowl, the Dream Team, they didn't make the playoffs, and the Giants won their game. What they had to do to get in and end up beating the Niners in the NFC Championship out here at Candlestick in the rain, soggy field conditions. Yours truly was out there in the cold, soggy out there at Candlestick, which would be the last time the Niners would ever host a NFC Championship game at Candlestick. And then after that, the Eagles, things just went south for the Eagles after that. 2012, they went 4-12. They suffered through their worst season. It would be Andy Reid's final year in Philadelphia. Then they parted ways, and then that one door closed in Philadelphia, another one opened in Kansas City, and you look at now that what he's persevered and, he've had his share of Super Bowl wins in recent years and, a class act, Andy Reid. People forget Andy Reid was an assistant and coached at SF State when once upon a time they had a football program there. And learned that's how he started. That's how you start this business. If you want to be successful, to get up to the NFL, you have to start the work down below, and you work yourself up. And then, as we'll take another shot of downtown Philadelphia. As the Eagles defeated the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22. Eagles winning their second Super Bowl in franchise history and their 5th NFL title overall. We're just chronicalizing the Philadelphia Eagles history, even though we're a Niners network, but we do it. We're doing it with class, and we kind of not only locally but on a national perspective of this franchise of the Eagles, of course. So, 2012 was Andy Reid's final year. He goes to Kansas City. Then it was Chip Kelly coming to Philadelphia. First year there, they go to the playoffs, and then things kind of went south again. Then they parted ways with him before the season ended after 2015. Then he would coach the 49ers, one and done. And then you bring in Doug Peterson, and they built that team. It was a couple of years later the Eagles win the Super Bowl, ending their long championship drought, and they end up beating the Patriots, who were the gold standard, to win up in Minneapolis to win the franchise's first Super Bowl title. And then and then they went back to the playoffs in 2018, and then uh, 2018, 2019 they made the playoffs, and then 2020 the COVID year they didn't get in, and then they end up ultimately parting ways with Doug Peterson. He just recently got fired from Jacksonville. Just a big mess there, and they just recently fired former 49ers GM Trent Baalke, which I think you knew that was going to be coming. And then Nick Sirianni, took his Eagles to the playoffs in 21, and have made it to the NFC Championship game 2 of the last 3 years. And then, last year they looked like they were the best team in the NFC, maybe in all of football. And then after that Niners win over the Eagles, things just fell apart for the Birds, and they really never recovered from that loss. And they made some changes on the coaching staff. They getting new coordinators both offensively and defensively, and then they're sitting here tonight. Eagles, another stat. Eagles winning 18 games, including postseason. That is a new franchise record in a single season. That is a new franchise single season record in a single season. Look at his final stats again: 17 out of 22, 221 yards. He threw 2 touchdown passes. So we just take a look of what's going on in other news. Speculation for 49 before we go tonight. Speculation is Debo Samuel. Most likely he has requested a trade, and I think that that's going to most likely happen. And the Niners getting, as the offseason approaches, we will still be having, just a reminder, we will still have 49ers, Niners Radio 49. We'll have some podcasts. We're going to be, within the next several days, we're going to try to get some people to come on our podcast to recap the season of the 2024, now 25 49ers, what went right and what went wrong, what the Niners have to do in the draft. We'll get you ready for the upcoming draft, what they're going to do. We'll have our full recap of the year for the 49ers. We'll let you know what's going to happen in this off season, and some important dates. The NFL scouting combine is going to be coming up in the next few weeks, uh, and we will still have 49ers Live throughout this offseason. There's no offseason, like they say, no breaks, no breaks, no breaks. So we're going to be having a lot of stuff during the offseason. We'll still be giving you Niners daily reports, what's going to be going on, Niners update up to the minute. We're going to be doing that during the offseason. We're going to be getting some guests come on. We're going to try to get Matt Mayoko sometime next week or whenever. We're going to get him to come on my podcast next week or so. We're going to get him to come on, recap the season. If not this coming week, but sometime maybe a week after the Super Bowl, We'll recap the season, what the Niners needs this off season, and them going forward, how they could come back, to bounce back for next year. And then we'll be doing that, and then we also going to try to get some people. And we're also going to take a look of so I'm trying to take a look as this as we conclude Super Sunday, the as we wrap up the 59th Super Sunday, and as we look ahead towards next year, we're gonna Niners Radio 49. And by the way, tonight we reached a today or tonight we have reached a big milestone. We got our 200th subscriber. A 200th subscriber reached in and checking out the podcast. We really appreciate that coming in and supporting us. That's a big milestone to have for our podcast. We continue to grow. Our mission is trying to get one you know. So let's just take a look. Take a look of what's lying ahead for 2020 next year's Super Bowl. And I hit the wrong button, so taking a look for Super Bowl 60. This is going to be what it takes to host a Super Bowl, and it takes a lot of work to do that, and we cannot be happy or excited that the Bay Area will be on the national spotlight, home of Super Bowl 60 next year. So we're gonna get ready to wrap it up. It's almost 10:52 is the time, satellite digital media time. We're now at 7 minutes before the top of the hour, 11 o'clock. 7 minutes as we're 7 minutes before it's almost 2 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, and Shaquan Barkley, by the way, he becomes only the third running back ever to win a rushing title in a Super Bowl in the same season. Terrell Davis did it back in, I think, 1997 or 98. Emmitt Smith did it in 1992. Doing the Cowboys, when that group won the first of three Super Bowls in a 4-year span. So we will probably have another edition of 49ers Live tonight. Tomorrow night, we'll just recap the whole Super Bowl scene. We will just get more and give you some 49ers news as well. And then we'll get you ready for the off season as well. There's no off season. There'll be no off season as we can continue to push hard, because our main goal is in 2025 to reach new heights. And as for your producer, host, podcast, media information director, this has been a great privilege over the last 3 seasons to be concluding my third season, my 8th year being a reporter for Niners Radio, and my third year completing as the mediator and your host, information director for Niners Radio 49. I took over the reins around this time 3 years ago, after when Brian Bauer and Dina Howard didn't want to do it no more. So I talked with Brian, and he gave me the full reign, gave me the keys to the Porsche, and I'm keeping my bargain on the deal as well as my end of the bargain, that I want to build this to be one of the best podcasters in the country. And it's been a transition period, but we've coming on strong over the last few months. And it was around this time, a little over 3.5 months ago, yours truly ended up winning the Entrepreneurship Award. Won that award, got $1,000 in grants, and it's going to really help us continue to grow this platform, reaching out not only locally throughout the Bay Area and beyond, trying to make this a global thing. We also want to try to not only get Matt Mayoko on, I'm going to try to get Jennifer Lee Chan on. I'm going to try to get go reach out to Lee Gowan for the 49ers UK, recap the Super Bowl, what the Niners needs in this offseason. We're going to have some guests. We're also going to try to get a 49er alum. I'm going to do a new series called Forever 49ers. And we get a Niner alum to come on and talk about their playing days with the San Francisco 49ers. And we're going to have some fun doing this off season. But for now, I'm going to get ready to wrap it up. I'm starting to get tired. I've been doing this all day. Been here at the broadcast center doing prepping for this, doing the Super Bowl and all the notes and stats. And we're going to wrap it up for tonight. And thank all you fans, Niner fans. I know it's a disappointing year. And I know things didn't turn out well. And, we're going to be back. Hopefully this time next year, the 49ers will be playing just like they did back in January of 1985 when they played Super Bowl 19 at down there at Super Bowl 19 at Old Stanford Stadium when they beat the Miami Dolphins. and we're gonna be there from the start to the end next year. For regardless what happens, we'll be out there for Super Bowl. We'll be building on some stuff in the coming months ahead. It's gonna be exciting. It's going to be exciting times for the 49er faithful. So you stay tuned to Niners Radio 49 and all of our affiliates with Satellite Digital Media as we continue to be the high standard, being the best quality programming in the country. So for the latest news on 49ers news and so much more, go to 49ers.com. Check out all the latest on the recap, Super Bowl highlights, and so much more. Go to NFL.com. And check us out again, youtube.com/@NinersRadio49. For now, Brian Professor B. Davis wishing all of you a very pleasant, so long and pleasant good evening. Once again, the final score, the Philadelphia Eagles 40 and the Kansas City Chiefs 22. On behalf of Niners Radio 49, the San Francisco 49ers, and the 49er chapters and the 49er Empire, we send our congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles and the most passionate city, the Philadelphia Eagles, dethroning the Kansas City Chiefs, as the Philadelphia Eagles are now the new champions of the football world. We wish all of you so long and have a very pleasant good evening, everybody, or wish all of you a very pleasant good night as the Eagles were winners tonight in Super Bowl 59 as they dethroned the Kansas City Chiefs as two-time Super Bowl champions, as the Philadelphia Eagles are now the new champions of the football world. Professor B signing off and wish all of you a very pleasant good night, everybody. Take care.